Hey math kids, today we're going to talk about how to solve equations algebraically. A lot of this stuff you've probably done in other classes, but we'll just go through it and see what you need. Okay, so we're going to start off with something pretty straightforward. If we have this situation, we want to add 2 to both sides, so x equals 5. Now we're going to try something like this. And if you're ever wondering which order things need to be in, we can go back to PEMDAS. But when we're doing algebra, we actually want to go backwards. And so we're going to follow SADMAP. So in this situation, we have multiplication, the 3 times the x, and then we have subtraction. So we look over at SADMAP, we see that s comes before m, and so we need to undo the subtraction, and we end up with 3x equals 7, and then the final step, divide by 3, and so x equals 7/3. Okay, now we'll keep increasing this. So this time we're going to have an x on each side. So before we can do SADMAP, we want to combine like terms. So in this case, I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides to get my x's on the same side. I have -4 equals -2x. Divide by -2. Negatives cancel. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And so x equals 2. Okay, we will try one like this. Okay, so let's go back to SADMAP just to make that part clear. So SADMAP. Now, this is considered an exponent. This is considered multiplication because it's multiplied by x. And then this is subtraction. So once we identify how they're interacting with x, we check to see which one comes first. So subtraction, to undo subtraction, we add 4. So we have 5x squared equals 19. Now now we have exponent and multiplication. Multiplication comes first. We undo that with division. And we have x squared equals 19/5. And the last thing is we have an exponent. And we square root to get rid of that. So x equals, remember when we introduce a square root into a problem, we actually get 2 answers. And so that's why we have the plus or minus. Okay, now let's keep moving on. This time we're going to put a fraction, use an exponent, and also have subtraction. Okay, once again, we write SADMAP, identify the pieces. So fraction is kind of a special case. It's like division and multiplication together, so I'm just going to call it a DM. This one's an exponent, and then this is subtraction. So over here we start with subtraction, so we undo the subtraction by adding 1. We have 3/5 x squared equals 10. And from here, the DM comes before the E. So we have an E here and a DM. Now to undo a fraction in just one step, we technically could multiply by 5 and then divide by 3, or divide by 3 and multiply by 5, whatever order you want. But I think the best way is just to multiply by the reciprocal. So we flip the fraction upside down and multiply by that fraction. Multiply both sides by 5/3. I know that's a bad 5, let's fix that. Okay, over here it cancels, so we just have the x squared. Over here we think of 10 as being 10 over 1, so we get 50 thirds. All right, now all we have is the exponent. So to undo that, we square root both sides. X equals plus or minus 50 thirds. So once again, we get two answers. Because we introduced the square root, we need a plus or minus. Okay, we have one more that's going to involve numbers. And then we'll move on to letters. Okay. Now, before we use SADMAP, we want to combine like terms. So I'm going to move this over here by subtracting all of it from both sides. All right, so we still have, so these cancel. So we just have the -1. And these will combine. So we have -3/5, -2/5. So that's -5/5 x squared. We can reduce that. This is really just like a -1, so it's -1 equals -x squared. The negative right here is like multiplying by -1, so it's like multiplication. This is like exponents. And so if we write SADMAP, we see that multiplication comes first. So to undo that, we will divide by -1. So -1 divided by -1 is 1. And then these negatives cancel, so we're just left with x squared. All right, we just have an exponent. So we square root. Now the square root of 1 is 1, but because we introduced the square root, we get plus or minus 1. Okay? Now, most of that was probably a refresher from a previous class. And now we're going to do it without numbers. So we're going to really stress what we're doing here. Okay, so this one we're going to solve for C. So we want to get C by itself. We're going to follow the same thing. We're just going to say SADMAP. And we want to know how everything's related to C. So since D is positive, it's actually being added to C. So we could write this like this. That's the exact same thing. And that makes it more clear that D is addition. But you don't have to rewrite it. That's addition. This negative sign is actually multiplication because it's like multiplying the C by a -1. We can kind of see that out here. And then the E is on the other side, so we don't have to worry about that. So we have addition and multiplication. Addition comes first, so we want to get rid of that. So we're going to subtract D from both sides. Once again, we could do it on this blue one as well. Subtract D, it would give us the same answer. So we have -C equals E minus D. And last thing is to divide by -1. So we're left with C. Now, we could leave it like this, but to fully simplify it, it's actually best to divide each one by -1. So we would end up with C equals -E plus D, because E divided by -1 would be -E, -D divided by -1 would be positive. And then just to make it look a little bit nicer, I'm going to say D minus E. Once again, this is acceptable. This is acceptable, but this is probably preferred. So if you feel like you can do that simplification, I'd encourage you to do that. Okay, and then